A United States senator used a military death investigation to steal a widow's pension. And the only way I could stop it was to trap his son in a lie on the witness stand in front of a panel that had already been told to bury the case. The dead soldier was a staff sergeant with 12 years of clean service. The crash happened on a two-lane highway 5 miles outside the gate, just after midnight. The vehicle rolled 3 times. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The other man in the truck walked away with a sprained wrist and a story that made no sense. That other man was the son of a sitting senator. His father made one phone call the morning after the wreck. 2 weeks later, command issued a report that branded the dead sergeant reckless, negligent, and unfit. They used that finding to deny his widow the life insurance payout and the pension she had been counting on to raise 2 kids under the age of 6. She lost everything because a powerful family needed someone to blame, and her husband was already dead, so he could not defend himself. I am a military prosecutor. I do not investigate crashes. I do not write these reports. I prosecute criminal cases when the evidence is clear and the chain of command asks for charges. But 3 months after the accident, a junior legal aide walked into my office during lunch, closed the door, and slid a manila folder across my desk without saying a word. Inside were 2 sworn statements from the same witness, the senator's son, describing the same accident. The first statement said he was the passenger. The second statement, dated 6 days later, said he could not remember who was driving. Both were signed, both were notarized. Both were supposedly part of the same official investigation. Only one made it into the final report. That was the moment I understood this was not an accident review. It was a cover-up with a federal survivor benefit attached. The widow's name was Angela. She was 31. She had worked as a dental hygienist on base until their second child was born. Her husband's life insurance was worth $400,000. His pension would have paid her just over $3,000 a month for the rest of her life. The line of duty finding took all of it. The language in the report was surgical. It said the sergeant had been driving recklessly, that he had been speeding, that he had lost control due to gross negligence. Gross negligence is the legal tripwire. It is the one phrase that lets the military claw back survivor benefits even when a service member dies in the line of duty. The report did not say he was drunk. It did not say the vehicle was broken. It said he was careless, and that was enough. But Angela's husband was not driving. I went back to the folder. The aide who brought it to me had also printed the gate camera stills from the night of the crash. Military bases log every vehicle that enters and exits. The cameras are not high definition, but they are clear enough. The image showed the truck leaving the base at 23:42 hours. The driver's side window was down. A man in a dark jacket was behind the wheel. His face was visible in profile. It was the senator's son. The passenger wore a tan uniform blouse and a patrol cap. That was the sergeant. The photo was time-stamped, geotagged, and stored on a server that no one had thought to scrub, because no one expected a prosecutor to go looking. That one image flipped the entire story. But I could not just walk it into a courtroom. The line of duty report had already been signed. Angela had already been denied. The case was closed. If I wanted to reopen it, I needed a legal hearing that would force the senator's son onto the stand under oath and make him answer questions he had been protected from for months. I needed an Article 32 hearing. An Article 32 is the military's version of a preliminary hearing. It is supposed to decide whether there is enough evidence to send a case to court-martial. But it has one feature that makes it different from a trial. The rules of evidence are relaxed. I could introduce documents that might not survive a motion to suppress later. I could ask leading questions. I could treat a witness as hostile even if command wanted him handled gently. And if I could prove that the senator's son had lied in a sworn statement, I could charge him with perjury, which would crack open the entire case and force a review of the line of duty finding. But I had to be perfect. If I brought the hearing and lost, my career was over. If I brought it and won, I would be accusing the son of a sitting senator of federal perjury, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to defraud a military widow. Either way, I was gambling everything on one cross-examination. I filed the motion anyway. Command tried to block it. My supervising attorney called me into his office the day after I submitted the paperwork and told me the case was not worth pursuing. He said the line of duty report had been reviewed at multiple levels. He said the findings were solid. He said I was wasting time on a closed matter. I asked him if he had read the two sworn statements. He said he had not seen them. I asked him if he had reviewed the gate camera footage. He said that was not part of the legal record. I put both documents on his desk and walked out. He did not call me back. 2 days later, the hearing was approved. I do not know who made that decision, but I know it was not my supervisor. Someone higher up wanted to see where this would go, or someone wanted to watch me fail in public. Either way, I had my hearing. I subpoenaed the senator's son as a witness. I also subpoenaed the military police investigator who had written the final report, the medic who responded to the scene, and the forensic pathologist who performed the autopsy. I requested the full case file, including all drafts, all statements, and all photographic evidence. I got about 60% of what I asked for. The rest came back marked as administratively misfiled or unable to locate. That told me someone had been through the records before I got there. But they missed something. Autopsy reports follow a template. Cause of death goes at the top. Mechanism of injury follows. Then comes a full body diagram marking every bruise, every fracture, and every pattern of trauma. The sergeant's report showed a massive depressed skull fracture consistent with roof compression during a rollover. It also showed a deep diagonal bruise across his left shoulder and chest. That bruise was from a seatbelt. It was clean, dark, and uninterrupted. The pathologist had noted it in the narrative as well. The sergeant had been wearing his seatbelt at the time of impact, and the angle of the bruise ran from his right hip to his left shoulder. That is, the passenger side seatbelt pattern. The driver's seatbelt runs the opposite direction. The senator's son had walked away from the crash with a sprained wrist, no seatbelt bruise, no chest trauma, no shoulder injury. That means he was not wearing a seatbelt at the time of the wreck. The only way that makes sense is if he had just climbed out of the driver's seat and was moving to the passenger side when the vehicle rolled. He had not been thrown. He had been repositioning. I also pulled the vehicle maintenance logs. The truck had been flagged 3 weeks before the accident for a steering problem. The work order said the play in the wheel was bad enough to cause drift at highway speed. The repair had been signed off as complete, but the mechanic's notes said the part had been back-ordered and the fix was temporary. The sergeant would have known that. He would not have volunteered to drive that truck on a highway at night. But if someone else had insisted on driving, someone without the mechanical knowledge to understand the risk, the sergeant would have gone along as the passenger. He would have trusted the other person to stay slow and careful. That trust killed him. I walked into the hearing with 3 pieces of evidence. The gate camera still showing the senator's son behind the wheel, the autopsy report showing the passenger side seatbelt bruise, and the 2 sworn statements, one saying he was the passenger and one saying he could not remember. I did not have a smoking gun. I had a pattern, and I had one chance to make him confirm it under oath before I showed him the proof. The panel was made up of 3 officers, a colonel, a lieutenant colonel, and a major. None of them were lawyers. The presiding officer was the colonel, a logistics officer who had never worked a legal case in his career. He had been told this was a routine preliminary matter. I could see it in his face when I walked in. He thought I was going to ask a few questions, submit a memo, and recommend no action. He was wrong. I called the forensic pathologist first. I walked him through the autopsy findings line by line. I asked him to explain the seatbelt bruise. He confirmed it was consistent with a passenger-side restraint. I asked if the driver would have a similar bruise. He said yes, on the opposite diagonal. I asked if the senator's son had been examined for injuries. He said yes. I asked if the medical report showed any seatbelt bruising. He said no. I thanked him and sat down. The panel was paying attention now. Then I called the senator's son. He walked in wearing a suit, not a uniform. He was not active duty. He was a civilian contractor with a clearance and a badge, but no rank. That was intentional. It meant he was not subject to military law unless he was placed under oath in a military proceeding. The moment he sat down, I had him. I started simple. I asked him to state his name and his relationship to the deceased. He did. I asked him to describe the night of the accident. He said they had left the base together just before midnight. He said the sergeant had offered to drive. He said they were heading into town for food. He said the road was dark and the weather was clear. He said the truck drifted left and overcorrected. He said it rolled 3 times. He said he did not remember much after that. His voice was calm. His answers were rehearsed. I asked him if he had given a statement to the military police on the night of the accident. He said yes. I asked him if he had given a second statement 6 days later. He paused. He said he did not recall. I handed him a copy of both statements. I asked him to read the first one aloud. He read it. It said he had been the passenger. I asked him to read the second one aloud. He read it. It said he could not remember who had been driving. I asked him which statement was true. He said his memory had been unclear due to shock. I asked him if he had been under oath when he signed the first statement. He said yes. I asked him if he understood that lying in a sworn statement was a federal crime. He said yes. Then I showed him the gate camera still. I did not say anything. I just placed it on the table in front of him, time-stamped and labeled. The panel leaned forward. The image was clear. He was behind the wheel. The sergeant was in the passenger seat. There was no room for doubt. I asked him if he recognized the vehicle in the photo. He said yes. I asked him if he recognized the 2 people. He said yes. I asked him to identify which person was seated in the driver's position. He did not answer. I asked again. He said the photo could have been taken earlier in the day. I pointed to the timestamp, 23:42 hours. The accident was called in at 23:56, 14 minutes later. I asked him if he was claiming that he and the sergeant had switched seats sometime in that 14-minute window. He said it was possible. I asked him why they would have done that. He did not answer. I pulled the autopsy report. I walked him through the seatbelt bruise. I explained the diagonal pattern. I asked him if he had been wearing a seatbelt during the crash. He said he did not remember. I showed him the medical report from the night of the accident. No bruising, no shoulder injury, no restraint trauma. I asked him how a passenger in a 3-roll accident could walk away without a seatbelt bruise unless he had not been wearing a seatbelt at all. He said he must have taken it off. I asked him when. He said he did not remember. I asked him if his father had contacted anyone in the chain of command after the accident. The room went silent. He said he did not know. I asked him if he had been advised to submit a second statement, revising his memory of the event. He said no. I asked him who had instructed him to change his story. His attorney objected. The presiding officer sustained it. I withdrew the question. But the panel had already heard it. I submitted the 2 statements, the gate camera image, the autopsy report, and the maintenance log as evidence. I moved to recommend charges for perjury and requested an immediate review of the line of duty report on the grounds of material false testimony. The senator's son left the room without looking at me. His attorney filed a motion to dismiss that afternoon. It was denied. 4 days later, the line of duty finding was overturned. Angela received full survivor benefits, backdated to the month of her husband's death. The senator's son was not charged. His father made a second phone call, and the case was referred to a closed review that never produced a public report. I was transferred to a different base 6 weeks later under the guise of a routine rotation. My fitness report that year was flawless, but I was never offered a promotion. I do not regret it. I used procedure, evidence, and one cross-examination to force the truth into a record that had been written to bury it. A widow got her benefits, a dead soldier got his name back, and a powerful family learned that protection has limits when someone is willing to read the fine print and ask the questions no one else wanted to ask. If you have ever watched someone in uniform get thrown under the bus to protect someone connected, or if you have wondered whether the truth actually matters when the people in charge have already decided the outcome, drop a comment and tell me whose side you were on.